Hello and welcome to today's webinar. We'll get started here in just a minute. We're excited to have you join us today. We're going to be talking about transparency in action, Sage Intacct to track grants, programs, and more. Today's webinar is specially created just for those in the nonprofit industry. You know, you're facing unique challenges when it comes to transparency and reporting, and we'll show you how Sage Intacct can help you address those challenges. While we're getting started, please feel free to use the Q&A panel in the chat if you have any questions during today's session. If you are here and seeking eligibility or credit for CPE, please ensure that you answer all the poll questions. There will be 4, and we'll provide plenty of time for you to have time to answer those. After the webinar, you'll get some follow-up information from us, and that'll include the slides, recording, and a survey about today's session. We would really appreciate if you would fill that out, help us continue to create and bring to you some valuable content. If you are eligible to receive those CPE credits, you'll get an email in about 2 weeks with your certificate. If you don't receive that in about 2 weeks, please reach out to us. You can reach us dawn.westerberg@lbmc.com. We'll get that certificate for you. So I want to welcome everyone to today's session. We'll be talking about transparency in action, Sage Intacct to track grants, programs, and more for nonprofits. I'm Nicole Brinson, Marketing Director here at LBMC Technology Solutions, and I'll be your host today. Thank you all for joining. Today, our session leader will be Jennifer Patterson from LBMC Technologies. Jennifer's got over 14 years of accounting experience, including 5 years with Sage Intacct, and she brings a wealth of knowledge to our session. Jennifer holds a Bachelor of Science in Accounting from ORU and is a certified CPA. Jennifer excels in consulting and training on technology to achieve business goals across various sectors. Today, we'll be talking about nonprofits. And additionally, Jennifer's actively involved in her community, volunteering with local nonprofit organizations. Jennifer, thank you for hosting today.
Thanks, Nicole. Appreciate the introduction. All right, well, welcome again. We're super excited to have you here with us today. This is the first in a series that we're doing for nonprofits on how we can increase that transparency and more effectively handle your financial data. This is a 4-part series. You don't have to join all 4 parts. You don't have to wait to get more information until the end. Today, we're just going to be focusing on how you can leverage Sage Intacct to track your data, how that's going to impact reporting, simplify your processes. Kind of a sneak peek later on, we're going to talk about financial reporting and custom reporting for data analytics. We'll do a session on automations and integrations to improve your efficiencies. And we're going to look at how Sage Intacct can make your audit, both internal and external, easier. It's all about getting that information that you need when you need it, the way that you need it. So today, we're going to focus on these 3 learning objectives. We're going to explore how a multi-ledger, multi-entity system integrates data across your organization. We're going to see how that dimensional reporting simplifies tracking of grants, programs, restrictions. And we're going to understand how Sage Intacct tracks those non-financial metrics, that data, for insightful analysis. Now, before we do all of that super fun and exciting stuff, we are going to have our first poll question.
You should be able to see that on your screen now. Got poll question number 1. And the question is, what ERP or accounting solution are you currently using? We've got options like Blackbaud, Dynamics GP or SL, NetSuite, QuickBooks, Sage Intacct, and other. I'll give you just a few more seconds here to answer. All right. We'll end our poll. And it looks like we have a variety. We've got some Dynamics GP or SL users. We've got some QuickBooks users, and a couple of others.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank y'all for sharing that information with us. I know it's for the CPE credits, but it helps us too. All right. So as we get started today, I kind of want to start with the why. Like, what's our end goal in this entire process, right? Why are we looking at accounting systems? Why are we talking about all of this stuff? And you know, the world's an uncertain place. You've got COVID and inflation and nonprofits that have federal funding are having a um, really uncertain time right now. And so all of that, right, proves that life is uncertain. And what's the saying? The only thing constant is change. So we're here because we want to get you the right tools in the right places to help you manage that uncertainty. We want to be able to respond when it's happening, not 6 months, 2 months, 6 years later, right? We want to be able to do it in real time. So that's really what this series, this transparency in action is looking at. We want to make sure that you can measure and understand performance in real time, that you're meeting those changing requirements with ease. We want to help you effectively plan for the uncertain and, want to be better positioned to diversify those revenue streams. So, we here at LBMC, we're keeping that in mind as we build this nonprofit series. We're keeping you and your needs at the forefront. Okay, so let's talk about what is a multi-ledger system. Um, you might be a little bit familiar with this concept using other accounting systems. It's not rocket science, right? This is basic accounting, but Sage Intacct is multi-ledger. So you can see from the picture here, order entry goes into accounts receivable goes into the general ledger, AP goes into the general ledger. Everything, all of these subledgers are flowing up into the general ledger. The general ledger then produces your financial reports. Um, w- why is this important, right? Well, the way Sage Intacct is set up is it allows permissions. So I can give my AP person access to the AP subledger, and they're not going to see, I don't want them to, cash management, they're not going to see AR, they're not going to see the general ledger. AP can only see AP. It gives you clear workflows to work with, right? I can see that purchasing flows into AP, it flows into general ledger. It's all very, very clear. It's segmented, but still integrated. And that gives you audit benefits as well, right? If they want to look at AP, here's the subledger. We don't have to dig through the general ledger to find AP. Now we're going back to AP and we're digging through to find the bills. It's all integrated while still being segmented. And that's keep saying integrated, that's really part to the way Sage Intacct has that multi-ledger system set up. Other systems either aren't multi-ledger or they are multi-ledger light. So you don't really see how it's creating that subledger and then feeding it into the general ledger. It's just going into the general ledger. Or it is, there are subledgers, but they are separate modules and they are not integrated. So what happens is I go into AP, I work my AP. Now I have to post AP to the general ledger. It's a manual process and I have to send it over. There's one system in particular where that actually causes issues in terms of things getting out of sync. So now my cash management module is out of sync with my general ledger. And how do I fix this? And it's just not a fun process. If you've ever experienced that, I hope you haven't. I hope that you're all going, what is she talking about? But Sage Intacct, it's creating that integrated module so the posting is happening in real time. So when I post something in AP, it's in my general ledger. So that can really help keep those things in sync and it can help with that transparency. All right. Also multi-entity. And so, what does multi-entity mean? If you're using QuickBooks, QuickBooks is a single entity structure. Multi-entity is where I can have multiple entities. It's a little bit redundant, sorry. But like if I have more than one federal ID number and I need to report on each individual federal ID, each federal entity separately, I can do that inside of Sage Intacct. I can set up entity 1, I can set up entity 2. Maybe you don't have different federal ID numbers, but you have multiple full-scale programs, and you need to report on those completely separately. I need a balanced balance sheet by this location, by this program, um, by this project, by this fund. And I also need to be able to report on a consolidated manner because my board wants to see everything in one place. Another use case for multi-entity is if you have a foundation. So I have my main nonprofit, and then I also have a foundation that supports the nonprofit. I can put that as 2 separate entities. Some people, if you are just a foundation, but you have multiple funds, you need to track each fund. Each entity could be a fund. Or maybe there's just something where you're running your current accounting software and you're keeping a second set of books in Excel for whatever reason. Maybe it's a full set of books, maybe it's just some general tracking, but we can bring that into Intacct and do separate entities in one place. It allows for that consolidation. It allows you to standardize metrics across your entities. What happens is you get a top level, and that is accessible across those entities. So that helps with any kind of intercompany, interfund. If you're entering information that needs to be allocated out, but you're also able to go down to the entity level and access just that entity. So that allows you to for permissions and restrictions. So I could have, person A works on entity 1 and person B works on entity or fund 2. They would never see each other's work, and they're able to just kind of stay in their entity, do their accounting, and then it flows up to you, and you're able to do that consolidated reporting, review, what have you. Towards the end of our presentation, we're going to look at Intacct. We'll do a demo. We'll look at what this looks like, make it make a little bit more sense. I know we're going through this fast, but this is not the fun stuff. We're really going to talk about dimensional reporting, and I know that's where we get excited. So before we get into objective 2, let's do another poll question.
Right, we'll get that going for you. All right, poll number 2. You should see it on your screen now. Which of the following are challenges for your organization? You can choose all that apply. We've got lack of process automation or efficiency, manual time-consuming reporting, lack of real-time visibility into key metrics and performance, budgeting and planning, lack of integration between key systems. We hear about that a lot, or other. We'll give everybody just a few more seconds to respond. All right, we'll close. And it looks like a variety. We've got some lack of process automation, definitely budgeting and planning, and manual time-consuming reporting are some of the leading challenges with 57%. Definitely some efficiencies to be gained.
Right, thank you. All right, so let's talk about dimensional reporting, and this can help with all of those issues, especially when you're talking about manual time-consuming reporting. This is inside of Intacct. Your GL structure is your foundation. When we do our implementations, we call it the foundation of the house. Right, this is where that reporting gets built. This is where you pick out those things that you need to track and you need to be able to slice and dice and report on. Intacct is built with what we call a GL dimensional structure. So we have our chart of accounts, and we have our GL natural account, and then we have around 6 additional dimensions. Say around because you are able to purchase additional dimensions. As nonprofits, you're actually have access to what we call user-defined dimensions. But we're gonna start with just talking about our standard dimensions. If you need more, we can get you more. But these dimensions, if you're in QuickBooks, you're familiar with having a GL account, and then you have a class, right? And maybe you might have like a location or department. I think they've added that one recently. So you have a GL account, and then you have two dimensions. So imagine that, but you get 6 or 7. Um, for Great Plains users, Dynamics, you're going to have segments. So you'd have like your natural account, and then you have your various segments, funds, locations. Can't think of others off the top of my head. With GP, it concatenates those into one GL string, and then that's your GL account. So what happens? You end up with a very long chart of accounts. Intacct takes that same kind of segment, but it individualizes them. It breaks them apart. So that way you have more flexibility in reporting. You have more flexibility in building out your various needs. So dimensions can be used across all transactions in all modules or ledgers. You can use those words interchangeably to track your data and your metrics. Like I said, you have a certain number that come with Intacct Standard. As a nonprofit, you can't remember off the top of my head if it's 2 or 3 user-defined dimensions. Um, but it's really nice because this is where we're building that report. This is where the rubber meets the road. So let's say you have grants. Maybe you have federal, local, state. Maybe you're applying to foundations. Could be reimbursable, might not. But there's a lot in grants, right? We have to be able to track the revenue coming in because it's potentially restricted. It may not be, but it's usually restricted. We have to be able to track that spend against it. Usually there's some level of reporting involved in that. And so if you're not able to tag AP, AR, general ledger, it can be hard to track those. So that's what a dimension does, is it lets you, and you can track that dimension, that grant against any GL account, and then you compare it with any of your entities, compare it with any of your locations. Something else you might need to track or want to track is programs, right? You've got maybe a senior adult program or youth camps or community outreach. And these are things that have real world impact, right? These are the programs that we are putting out there in the community. And I need to be able to track this. I need to be able to track any donations that come in. And of course, I want to track spend. And, we'll talk about non financial data here in a minute. Maybe I want to track participants or something like that. I want to be able to quantify some of that impact. I need a dimension to do that. Other examples would be projects, maybe capital expenditures or development initiatives, campaign tracking, right? So I worked with one nonprofit one time. They didn't do a capital budget. They did basically cash accounting to capture that. So they put it in their operational budget. But then at year end, because they needed audited financials that were GAAP compliant, they would then go in and reclass those at year end. Not a big deal, but wouldn't it be great if there was a way to track that spend easily and not necessarily have it show up on the face of the GL? So that's something a dimension could accomplish. Development initiatives. So let's say your marketing department, they're out there and they want to do the winter postcard. That's great, but how do we measure if that winter postcard was successful or not? How much did we spend on it and how much revenue came in from it? Well, I have a dimension for that. Same with campaign tracking. Maybe you have an annual campaign. So we want to track that as an initiative. Maybe there's a gala or something like that. So it just gives you these things that you need to maybe report to the board or you want to track your P&L on. And so you can do that. And of course, we're a nonprofit, so we're going to be looking at restrictions. You could do unrestricted, restricted. I know the terminology now is with donor restriction versus without donor restriction. Um, you can also use that restriction to do specifically named. So what you can do is instead of, let's say you're looking at the screen and you're like, I have all 4 of them, but I only have 6 dimensions and I don't want to buy extra ones. I don't want to use the user to find one. That's fine. We can combine some of these dimensions into one. Intacct allows for parent-child relationships. So you're able to say, I'm going to have a dimension called restrictions, and then I'm going to have unrestricted, and I'll have restricted. But then under unrestricted will be general, admin, and then under donor restricted or restricted, that's where I'll put that senior adult, that youth camps, that community outreach, maybe even my grants. So that gives you still the ability to report on restricted versus unrestricted, and still capture those specific restrictions, those specific programs or projects. So what we can't do though is you can't tag one transaction line with 2 of the same dimension. So we couldn't combine the winter postcard initiative with the senior adult program because we need to be able to track senior adult program as its own restriction, right? We need to be able to see that as itself. And then we need to be able to see the winter postcard by itself because it's going to have development expenses, right? Not necessarily restricted program expenses. So there's a lot of options there. That is something that if you're like, I love this, I want to talk through, you don't have to figure it all out before you start the process. We are here to help you design that and talk through that. There is a lot of freedom and a lot of options in here to capture all of that data. So a common setup that I see is that, they'll have entities, right? We talked about that multi-entity, multi-fund. Underneath entities is locations. So locations are their own dimension, but they are a one-to-one relationship with entities. So if I had, and again, we'll look at this in the system, it'll make more sense, I promise. But there is a parent-child relationship between entities and locations. They are separate and yet the same. They're the only ones like that, though. It's the only limitation there. Then we'll see departments, employees. Intacct has a class dimension. That's what we usually see renamed restrictions. There is an additional grants dimension that you can purchase. Of course, your vendors and AP are considered a dimension, and then your customers in AR. Any of these, with the exception of maybe entities, can be renamed. So if you want employees to read participants, you want grants to read projects, we can do that. All of these have parent-child relationships inside of them, so you can have hierarchy, which helps with grouping. If you're managing AR outside of Intacct, so you have a donor management system, you have a CRM, something like that, you're planning on, right now this is how you do it. You see this a lot in healthcare, or even with education. We are bringing AR directly into the general ledger because we have our third-party system. We can then use that customer dimension as an additional standard dimension. So we see a lot of times in healthcare, right, where you have insurance or private pay or things like that. They have to track that. And so we'll use the customer dimension for that. Okay. All right, so real world application within Intacct. When I have these dimensions set up, I can use them to create what's called a dimensional report. So I've got two examples here. You'll see here's fundraising by campaign. So in our demo environment, we set up this campaign. Here are various names. So then our campaigns are in the rows. And then the contributions, our financial data is in the columns. And then that way we can report on our campaign without having to, pull the general ledger or run a financial report. And now here I'm drilling down into it. We just created a report. It's right there. And then this can be ran by any date range. You'll notice that in the columns, those numbers are blue. So if you did want to drill down, you're like, what is this $918,295? You can click on it. It's going to pop up and it's going to give you that general ledger detail. Another example here is the ministry physician report. You can see different metric. I believe that's departments from the demo environment. But here I can show you revenue and expenditures by department, by fund, whatever dimension you need it by, and then it can do the math to show you remaining funds available. We could do budget to actual based off of dimensions. Intacct also provides out-of-the-box reports. Most of our financial reports are built off of your account group structure, so that's your general ledger accounts. And your base reporting, most of your out-of-the-box reporting is going to be similar to this, where we have our GL accounts are on the rows. So, right, we see salaries, bonus and incentive, etc. And then the financial data, the GL accounts are over here by that GL account. And then we have our programs, our departments are now in the columns. So even on your basic, functional expense, financial position, statement of activities, things like that, you're still going to be able to break those out by dimensions. So you can see things, I could see this by department, I could see it by location, I could see it by grant. It gives us lots of flexibility because we can move those dimensions where we need them to be. All right. And we will, I've said this a couple times, I'll say it again. At the end, we're going to go into Intacct and look at some of these, kind of see what the navigation looks like and how this comes together and how easy it is to run it. Before we do that, we have poll question number 3.
All right. It should be on your screen there. Poll question number 3. Which of the following are priorities for your organization? You can choose all that apply. We have enhanced donor and grant management, financial sustainability, diversification of revenue sources, better budgeting and forecasting capabilities. Maybe you're looking to improve cost management, or build a finance team. Build your team's skills and capacity. We'll give everybody just a few more seconds to respond. All right, and we'll wrap up the poll now. And the winners, as far as challenges go, is enhancing donor and grant management, as well as better budgeting and forecasting capabilities.
All right. There we go. All right, so non-financial data. We've talked a little bit about the structure of Intacct, how we can tag those, seeing how it shows up on a report, and something else we can do inside of Intacct that helps with managing our donors and our grants really, I think, has a lot of benefit too when you're looking at forecasting and budgeting is that those non-financial metrics. Um, maybe you want to track visits or participants, visitors, volunteers. There's there's all sorts of things that you can track. If you can think of it, we could probably track it. So let's say you have a program that you're running, summer camp. So we do the summer camp every year. And now we want to track participants for summer camp. And you've been tracking it in Excel, and that works. Maybe you have the number in a camp management software out there, but that is not then integrated with our financial information, right? Um, what I can do in Intacct is create a stat account. I name it participants. This can then be paired with any other Intacct dimension. So all of those dimensions we just talked about, I can track participant by department, by program, by initiative. Um, and that way I can have one participant account, just like I can have one GL account, and I can use it for all my programs. I don't just have to use it for summer camp. And that one stat account then has multiple real world implications. Um, now that that is in Excel, or not Excel, excuse me, it's in Intacct, it's out of Excel, into Intacct, I'm able to use that in conjunction with my financial accounts, my account groups, and I can report on financial metrics that allow me to see things like cost per participant or revenue per participant or um, you're talking about or I talked about development initiatives. So we've got volunteers helping us with that. And then like how many volunteers do I need to make this work? Things like that. Not doing great examples, but hopefully you get where I'm going with this. Uh, And volunteers is a great one, right? Volunteers help our nonprofits run. But it'd be nice sometimes to know how many volunteers do I have by program? How many do I have by department? How many do I have by whatever dimension, maybe even by entity or location? The other perk to putting these inside of Intacct is I can view those year over year comparisons on participation and engagement. I don't have to go outside of my system and run a separate report in another system. It's all there. Um, I can, okay, here's a big one. I'm simplifying grant applications because I'm maintaining those key metrics inside of Intacct, right? Foundations, United Way is a big one. United Way, if you're applying for some of their funding, there's an application process, right? And they want to know things like what's your program impact in number of people? Like how many people are you reaching with these programs, with your initiatives? And if I'm tracking that in Intacct, it's a report I run and I have it and I can fill out a grant application. I have those metrics. If they say, what's your impact from the last 3 years? I've got it because I've been putting it inside of Intacct. And so again, we go back to that performance in real time. Mm, all right. So here's an example report that you can run. You see fundraising metrics. So your development wants to know, what's our donor count? What's our number of major donors, active donors, number of gifts, the contribution amount, grant awards, grant revenue, number of sponsors. All of that is in one report. So I'm not having to go over to my CRM, my donor management system. I'm not going to Excel. I'm not going running around behind program directors and asking them to provide that. I'm getting it, putting it in Intacct. I have it when I need it. Here's one that's showing per pupil funding. So, right, I have number of students. I would then be able to add in tuition if I wanted to, and I'd see tuition, number of students, and then I could, inside of Intact, I can calculate, what is that average? So if my tuition is, a set amount, take that, divide it by number of students, what's my average tuition per student? Um, maybe with schools, you got to set tuition, so not as exciting. But you've got camp, you've got weekend programs, you've got things where you offer various, levels, things like that. And you're just kind of going, well, what's my average income per person? And what's my average expense? Like we don't do nonprofit work for the money, right? We do it for the impact. But sometimes boards need to see, like, what is this costing us versus what are we bringing in versus what's the number of people this is impacting. I've been there when they want to know, like, this is costing us X and it's not raising revenue. So why are we doing it? Okay, well, here is a number of people, real lives that I can give you that shows you the impact. And it can be mind changing for your board sometimes to see that number versus it just being like, well, let me go take a survey. Let me go ask. Let me go find out. Let me go talk to a program director. Look, I've been tracking this all this time. I have it. Um, it is it is a great thing when your board asks you a question or your finance committee asks you a question and you're like, actually, let me just run a report for that. So here's one that shows that tuition by this is tuition by campus with student count. So this is kind of bringing it all together. So here's our tuition. That's a financial metric. It's an account group. Here's number of students. That is our non-financial stat account. And then here's one of our dimensions. This one is called sites. It's actually a user-defined dimension inside of our demo environment. And so I'm able to even break that down even further. This is where, like I said, it all kind of comes together and we can see this is, this is what we're doing, this is what we're tracking, this is how we get there. All right. Let's do the good stuff. Let's actually look at it inside of Intacct. I'm gonna talk through this again with visuals. Okay. All right. So talked about it being multi-ledger. So this is what Intacct looks like. Um, here is sometimes we'll say modules, sometimes we say applications, sometimes we say subledgers, kind of depends on the context. But here you can see where all of those are. When I click on applications, here's my general ledger, here's my various subledgers. Now, this is a demo environment, so it has core plus, plus, plus. But Intacct, it's going to come standard with your reports, your budgets, your general ledger, cash management, AP, AR. And then you can talk about purchasing and order entry. I believe it's part of core. Not everybody uses it. But everything feeds back into this general ledger. And you can see here where we have our top level. So I did come in at the top level, consolidated level. So I have access to everything. If I run reports at this level, I can see everything. If I don't filter a report at the top level, I'm getting a consolidated report. Now, Intacct does not automatically do consolidating, eliminating entries, but it will put everything together, right? So if you did have due to, due froms, it's not going to consolidate them, it's going to consolidate them. It's not going to eliminate them. But it still nets to zero. It just doesn't have that pretty presentation. These are our entities. This one is set up so that the entities are different funds. So I have a Health Initiative 1 grant fund, this Travis County Contract Fund, DuPont Foundation Award Fund. What Intacct does is base functionality without any additional configuration, I am able, by these entities, by these funds, to run a balanced balance sheet. So if I go into reporting and I run a balance sheet with a fund comparison, here we're going to see here's each of those funds, and they are all going to balance. Now, if I run just a balance sheet at the top level, no additional filters. Oops. I now have current year, prior year, any differences. And again, it's going to balance. This is just everything all together, all in one. So it can be nice because, right, I can see the whole scope of everything we're doing in one place. And then I can drill down and I can see, and I'm not going to have to worry about if my, DBA, my other entity, my other fund, if it's balanced. Intacct's going to require balancing at that level. Now, here, under company, we can see those. This is where most of your dimensions live. Here's that entities said. Here it's set up as a fund. Here is our actual dimensions. So in this environment, we have sites, which is a user-defined dimension. User-defined dimensions are additional dimensions. They aren't standard. They are user-defined. So what that means is you tell us, this is what I want it to track, this is what I want it named. We create it for you. You aren't limited by the standard terminology, any of the standard use cases. This program is our locations dimension. So this is the one we talked about where it has to have a one-to-one relationship with our entities. So we have these funds, these entities set up. And then their funds, their grants, there's not an actual physical location we're trying to track. But we have various programs that those grants, those funds are going to support. So what we did is we took location, we renamed it program, and now we're setting up our programs. So here, the health initiative has health screenings, rural health has medical bus, Slytherin Award has education. You can have as many or as few of these as you need. You don't have to have a program or location to tag an entity. Your only constraint here is that it does have to tie back to a parent. So let's say the health initiative and rural health both had health screenings. I would have to create another program in order for that to be tracked, which makes sense, right? The health screenings for the one grant and the health screenings for the other grant, they're being paid for by different funding sources. I need to track them separately. But it's that easy to add a dimension to be able to track it. See here we have departments. And these are more of what you traditionally think of as departments. I see a lot of people using this, like this is where they're budgeting at, right? We budget at department level. So we're going to take department, we're going to take GL account, and that's where we're going to budget. Intacct will allow you to load a budget with as many or as few dimensions as you. Intacct will allow you to load a budget with as many dimensions as you want. You could budget down to the vendor. Now, do we recommend that? Is that best practice? That really depends on your situation, but it can do it. You're not stuck with, I can only go to the GL account. You can have a different budget per department, per entity, per location. As deep as your budget people want to go, we can go. Here we have restrictions. Our class dimension is set up as a restriction. So, there's these demo environments are a little bit old. So it was originally set up with restricted, unrestricted, and then temporarily and permanently. I know new net assets is with donor and without donor, but I wanted to show you that parent-child relationship. So I could have, instead of this being temporarily restricted, it could be a specific program or a specific grant. It could be something that I'm needing to track by name. And then, of course, you could do a general or not do general, just do everything to do without donor restriction. There's some freedom there. You can do what works best for you. Of course, AP has a dimension, or vendors. Obviously, when you're in AP and you're working a bill, you have to tag it with a vendor. But Intacct does allow you to tag other transactions as well. So if I wanted to tag a general ledger transaction with a vendor, I can do that. Now, if I tag it with a vendor in AP and it goes up into the general ledger, that vendor is going to stay attached. If I create an entry inside of the general ledger with a vendor, it's going to stay in the general ledger. It is not bi-directional. You cannot enter something in the general ledger and it flows back down into the subledger. It would be a GL report or a dimensional report to see where you've tagged it. But it can still be helpful. And then, of course, AR, it's your customers. This can be customers, it can be grantors, donors. Like I said, a lot of times in healthcare, where you're dealing with EMR systems, we don't see people use AR inside of Intacct. And so we repurpose this dimension as well. All right, let's look at why we care about all those things. So then again, look, here's a report, grant positions. We've done all this work, set up all these dimensions. They're in there. Now I need a report, right? Let's talk about the board wants this report. They want to know this metric. Well, they want to know it right now. Well, I just come in here, go to reports. I'm going to click HTML. I have a report. Here's my grants and contract funds. Here's that award amount, revenue booked, remaining draw, expenditures, remaining spend. I can run that for any date range at any time. This specific report is set to an as of date, so I didn't have to put in filters. But any financial report can be filtered by any of these dimensions, any date range. It's just it's really click of a button to turn it on. Let's see. So here's one called revenue by customer. Hardest part about this process is finding it. And demo environment, so we're going to go back in time. And then here we go. Here's my customers. And then I can see these columns are account groups. So this is my GL data. So here's the GL data for service fees, my sales, direct support, and then I have a total. Our stat accounts actually live in our general ledger. So in our general ledger, you have your general ledger accounts, your natural account. So that's right, AP, AR, revenue, donations, things like that. And then my statistical accounts live here as well. And so you can see in this demo environment, lots more examples than I gave you. We can use it to address time. Like maybe you need a metric by number of weeks. We have a 8-week program and I need to know something by a number of weeks. create a stat account for that. Square footage, if you have to do any kind of occupancy allocation or overhead allocation, that's in there as well. We see a lot of head count and then like participants, things like that. Once we have these in here, they do act similarly to a general ledger account. So we do have to enter journal entries for them to get the information in. But once it's in there, again, we're going to go to reports and grab a financial report. I'm actually going to search for this one because I don't want to have to go looking and scrolling. So it's going to let me filter by name. So here's that tuition by campus with student count. Gonna hit HTML again. This one has the date filter on. So we're gonna go back in time. And there's that report that we were looking at earlier. Only now I could run it as of yesterday or as of 22. I could easily take this as well and do a 3-year comparison, however we need to slice and dice it. And we will talk about this more on our next webinar. We'll focus specifically on financial reports, what they are capable of, how we build them, maybe not how we built them, but what goes into them. But these dimensions have to be set up to get here. All right, I know we're getting short on time, so I want to show you one more thing that Intacct will do with your dimensions. We have dashboards. And so I have a lot of dashboards because, again, I'm in a demo environment. But I am able to create these dashboards. And it's going to give me this. We have performance cards, and that's these things here on the side. We have graphs. I could put in reports. But this is really using all that stuff we just talked about, right? I'm looking at financial data. I'm looking at number of gifts per donor, cost per dollar donated, donor ratios, contributions by campaign. So we're using those dimensions. We're using those stat accounts. We're using our financial data all in one place. And we are able to pull it in and create these dashboards, which here it is. Maybe you have an executive board, like, right, your treasurer, your president, and they just want high level detail. They don't want a full board report. Here you go. Here's giving by restriction. Revenue by source is in here. If we had events set up, we could measure event contributions. Let's see, and then there's one more. Which one? Okay. Nope. Hold on, let me get there. All right, there we go. So you can see you can mix and match. You can have as many dashboards as you want as well. So then you can have a dashboard for your controller versus your CFO, even your AP clerk. They're going to care about AP. They don't necessarily care about some of these higher level details, but it allows you to create efficiencies, quicker reporting. If you have program directors or department managers, here's things that they can use to manage their budget, manage their program, manage what they're doing without getting lost in all the financial data, right? And also, let's be honest, we don't want them digging around in our systems. We just want them to see their metrics. So here's a way to let them visually see what they need to manage without having to worry about what else they're clicking into. You can, if you have proper permissions, click into any of these and it will bring up the detail behind it. So here's all that detail. But I just wanted to show you this one because here's those performance cards that are based off of the stat accounts as well as our financial data. And then here's a report that I can pull in. And again, it's utilizing those dimensions. And so we're able to customize this to the metrics and the things that you care about and the things that you want to know and you want to see. And it's real, like, how quick was I doing that? It's probably a little bit head spinning, right? You're probably going, okay, can you show me that again, but slower? But that's just how quick and easy Intacct can be. All right, I know we're getting late, so let's talk poll question number 4.
All right. So this is an offer that we like to extend for our special guests, our webinar attendees, is would you be interested in a lunch and learn about you? Basically, this is an opportunity for you to get some quality time with our consultants, with Jennifer here, if nonprofit suits you best, to answer some questions, and we'll learn about what challenges you're facing and what areas you might be able to find some more efficiencies. It's purely consultative. I'll leave this up here for just a few more minutes. We'd have that lunch delivered to your office, or if you're remote, you can have it delivered to your remote location. But a time for you to get your teams together and identify some challenges you might have. All right, we'll end the poll now, here in just a sec. All right, thank you.
All right. Well, before we go today, did we have any Q&A that popped up that the panelists weren't able to address we needed to look at?
We did not get any questions put in the Q&A, but if you decide that you've got some questions after this, or there's something you'd like to get some more information on, please feel free to reach out. Again, we'll be sharing the link in the recording and the slides. This was a great presentation, Jennifer. Thank you. It's a lot of great resources available for nonprofit organizations.
Yeah. All right. Well, then we would love to invite you to our upcoming webinars. We appreciate you joining us today. Hope you got something out of it. But if you are interested, we do have one coming up next month. What day is it? Next month for healthcare. Then obviously we'll be talking reporting with me again in May. And we'll make sure that you get that registration link if you are interested.
Yes, thank you, Jennifer, and thank you to all the attendees today. We hope you found the information valuable, and we look forward to seeing you at future upcoming events.